Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're going to give this a minute or two to allow for everyone to stream in before we kick things off. Yeah, as Kit just mentioned in the chat, feel free to introduce yourself there. Let us know where you're from, what's interesting you in terms of this topic that we're chatting about today. And then you're going to have access to the Q&A tool to ask questions during the presentation, should any questions come up. For those that are just jumping in, we're just giving it another minute to allow for the audience to stream in. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're from, what's interesting you in the topic of AI this afternoon or this morning, depending where you're joining from.
Fun seeing some places and names I recognize in the chat popping up. Also some new ones.
All right, it looks like the people streaming in is starting to slow down just a bit. So I think we'll probably go ahead and get things started. So I will go ahead and begin by kind of introducing myself. We all know we're here to talk about kind of controlling AI in online education. And we really want to talk not just about how can we stop the use of AI, but how can we leverage it? How can we use it? And how can we kind of play both sides of the coin to maximize learning for our students? So my name is Jordan Adair. I'm the VP of Product at HonorLock, former teacher. I spent about 5 years teaching elementary and middle school. Got into teaching through coaching. I was coaching high school football and basketball, then sort of transitioned into teaching. After getting into ed tech and the product world, my entire product career has been focused on the concept of secure assessment, right? So at HonorLock and my previous company, that was really our bread and butter and what I was most focused on. So, now that ChatGPT is mainstream and we're all trying to figure out how to adapt to it, I'm excited to be here to talk to you about that today. With that, I'll pass it over to my partner, Jeff, to introduce himself.
Sure. I'm Jeff Hammonds. I'm Senior Sales Executive here at Moodle. Interestingly, my lineage to get here also comes through teaching, although I didn't learn as quickly because I was an elementary teacher for 18 years. That also means I'm just older than him, but also kind of always was that technology focused teacher, always looked at leveraging that technology and embracing it, which is kind of also led me to really being excited on generative AI and how that's, affecting us and just responsible and interesting ways that that's going to affect all of us in our jobs. So I'm excited to talk to you about that today.
Awesome. And we're really happy to have such a good audience here. Please feel free to use the Q&A during the session. We want to start things off with a question of our own to kind of get a feel for where everyone's at in terms of familiarity with the latest batch of AI tools and how they work. I think we've all heard of them, but we really want to know, how deep are you in terms of the inner workings of ChatGPT or Baird or other similar things, so that we can direct our conversation to the right level based on the audience. So we've got a good amount of responses coming through. Leave this open for just another 15 seconds or so. And it looks like on the whole, we're sort of in the middle of the road between slightly familiar and moderately familiar, which is good. I think our presentation will be well suited for that level of familiarity. And if anyone does have any advanced questions, Jeff and I will certainly do our best to answer those as we keep an eye on the Q&A throughout the presentation. All right, so I've just shared the results out if anyone would like to just take a look at where we stand on the poll. And we will move forward to kind of talk a bit about the types of AI tools that we're going to be discussing today. So there's sort of two buckets that these AI tools will fall into. And one of them is our ChatGPT or related chatbot applications, right? So ChatGPT, Google Baird, Bing AI, and a whole variety of other smaller names that are out there. Those are the things that we've heard so much about in the news lately around, they can pass a board exam, they can pass a law test. And the thing that so many of us are concerned with around writing essays and academic integrity associated with those chatbots. There's another bundle of what I'm going to call AI browser extensions that are really purely built to help students cheat. The most popular, at least recently, has been one called Transcript that essentially will just overlay a button on top of a student's exam page and allow them to click, and then it's going to give them the likelihood of each of the choices being the correct answer. In comparison to chatbots, right, which can serve a great academic purpose, they can be used as something to augment a person's work or to help a student learn. There's really no great use case for these AI browser extensions. And these are things you might be purely interested in blocking. And we'll talk a bit more about those, but I at least wanted to lay the groundwork on these two different types of AI tools that we'll be discussing throughout the rest of the slides. So let's go just surface level on how ChatGPT works so that we can all be speaking the same language and kind of reading off the same script as we continue through this. And, I'm not in the OpenAI team deep in ChatGPT, but based on research, looking through a variety of interviews from their team and some of the other articles that have been written, this is sort of the best overview that I can provide you in terms of how it's trained, how it works, and how that kind of impact our expectations and the way that we work with ChatGPT. So first, there's sort of this fundamental learning stage called pre-training. This is where OpenAI is really trying to just build a large language model in this stage. This is pour in millions and millions of resources as much as possible so that the large language model can try to predict what is the next most likely word to come in a sequence. That's essentially what a large language model is doing. Think of it kind of like auto predict when you're sending a text message, right? Your phone is trying to predict what's the next word that would come in its language model. That's obviously being fed inputs mostly from you. Think about that on a larger scale with millions of inputs from all these different sources. The next phase has to do with fine tuning. This is where we'd want to try to teach the AI model what type of response a human user actually prefers. So instead of just feeding it tons of data, now we're having it reply back to us, and then we are trying to essentially rank, or to give it feedback in terms of here was a good response, here was a poor response. In the evaluation and feedback stage, this is where we get more into the ranking element. So this is ChatGPT, produce 10 responses for me on topic XYZ. ChatGPT will produce 10 responses. And then me and a team of experts, and I'm saying this as in the first person, but OpenAI's team of experts on that given topic will then rank those 10 responses from best to worst based on their expectations of what it would produce. So if they're asking it topics about medicine, then there'll be some doctors involved in the evaluation and feedback stage. If they're asking questions about engineering or whatever the topic might be, there's going to be AI experts in that pool, and there's going to be subject matter experts in that pool that are then ranking those responses, and they call this the reward model. After it's worked through the first three stages, the pre-training, the fine-tuning, the evaluation and feedback, then it gets deployed and is going to go through a rapid iteration phase. This is where it's getting feedback from everybody. Right? If you use ChatGPT, you have a chance to give it a thumbs up, thumbs down. How was my response? That feedback is then getting fed back in to the model so that it can improve upon itself over time. So again, very basic, but those are kind of the 4 stages of AI training and how ChatGPT and other similar chatbots go through the learning process. So let's talk about some of the benefits of AI and how we can use this to our advantage, how we can use this to our students' advantage in online education. And I'll pass it over to Jeff to kick that off.
Sure. There's a lot of, benefits to AI, both for our students and to us as educators and teachers. And several of those that I thought, to me, when I think back to me being a teacher, one of the greatest things is nobody will ever have to start with a blank page ever again when you wanted to start designing a new lesson, a new curriculum, whatever. ChatGPT or any other AI model likely is not going to be able to create a lesson that is as impactful and as important as, that will be able to come from a teacher, but it's going to make great teachers have to work a lot harder because they don't have to start with that blank page. They can generate ideas, they can get a framework, they can do a lot of things through that. An example, just in kind of a completely obscure example, one of the things I had mentioned in my bio is that I also am a farmer, very big into sustainable agriculture and things like that. And one of those things that I do through that is I teach other farmers how to do that. And recently I wanted to create an online asynchronous course on pastured poultry, a very obscure topic not many people would know about. Using ChatGPT, though, I was able to use, to generate tons and tons of really good ideas on how I should outline that. In those prompts, I can put things as specific as, using, constructivist thinking and things like that, that really gets it to what I want. But AI helped me get that so much faster than starting with a blank page. And I think that is going to have a huge impact on us as professionals in being able to do that. Also, the ability to create test questions and lecture notes. You could, for instance, take your lesson, upload that into ChatGPT and ask it now to create quiz questions. And you can even ask for different types of quiz questions. You can ask for them in different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. There are so many ideas in that. And I use ChatGPT a lot when I need to brainstorm ideas. And I will say, okay, I'm creating this, new thing. Please give me some more ideas. And you literally can have a discussion back and forth with that as if you had an expert in your room with you. Another really cool thing that you can do with that similarly is say, act as whoever, and simulate a conversation. They then are able, because ChatGPT has been trained on all of their books and published knowledge, they can have a very realistic, very challenging, very, intellectually stimulating conversation that will help you become a better teacher.
And so to expand a bit on that, we want to talk some about what are some of the real world scenarios that I've seen at HonorLock as we've been working through the world of AI. We've talked to a ton of faculty members who are doing a lot of really interesting things. So these ideas that I'm going to share here are certainly not mine. They're things I've seen actually being used in the classroom. And we also had a question come through that I think this is a decent time to respond to that. The question was, at what point does AI become citable? Are we seeing instructors cite AI if they're using it to help them build their course? What types of things are we seeing around having students cite AI? And I will at least speak for myself here, and then when Jeff gets up in a couple slides, he can maybe add if he's got something else he's seen. But I have not seen faculty or them asking their students as of yet to cite AI. What I have seen, and we'll talk a bit about here, is on the student side of things, faculty are creating scenarios where AI is expected to be used for certain elements of the assessment process. And so in turn, they know that the students are using it. So it's not being cited because they understand it's part of that exam. But I certainly can see that there could be faculty out there that are asking their students, hey, write this essay, there's no rules, just write it. And if you are going to use ChatGPT, then, cite it as a source. But I have not firsthand seen any great processes for how someone's implementing that. But what I have seen are some really cool things. So number one, we've seen, and Jeff hinted at this a bit, instructors assigning role-playing activities to their students. So we want you to play the role of a doctor that is analyzing a patient, and let's have your initial conversation of how you're going to probe them for their symptoms, right? Like that's a very common one that I've seen. Another would be to assign some debate topics. I want to debate you on the question, do public libraries have a role in the future? I could say to ChatGPT, I will argue in favor of libraries' role in the future, and you will argue against it. Here is my opening argument. And I'll go ahead and type out my opening statement. And then ChatGPT and the student will go back and forth for a pre-designated number of rounds. And then that debate transcript is what gets submitted to the instructor for grading. And in that type of environment, you really start to see the students' knowledge get stretched because you get deeper into the debate. They have to then respond to ChatGPT and try to really prove their point in a way that you couldn't really simulate in another world, right? If you wanted to simulate this type of assessment without AI, you'd have to get two students together to actually debate each other and submit that transcript. So this is a great way to have a similar style of assessment, but in a solo environment where the students by themselves. And then another thing that I've viewed at least a handful of instructors do so far, this one's probably a little less common compared to the ones I just shared, but I don't think any less effective. So in this world, you expect your students to use ChatGPT. You know that the end response is going to be something that comes from ChatGPT or any other chatbot. But what you're really grading is not the output of the AI chatbot. You're grading the prompts that the students have used to get to that output. What you'll see is as you get, and we'll also show some examples in a bit about how prompts kind of work with ChatGPT and other chatbots. But what you'll notice if you've used the tools to any large degree, the initial prompt is typically going to respond. You're going to get a very average answer, right? It takes some crafting. You have to see that answer and then probe the chatbot for more. Probe ChatGPT to give you more details or to change the writing style or to, hey, include more information about this portion of your response. Or you'll also often find things that aren't correct in that response that you need to correct as the student. So you can tell a lot more from the prompt, at least in these instructors' opinions, and I would tend to agree, tell a lot more about what a student knows by the prompts that they are using compared to the output of ChatGPT in the end.
I think another really important and going to be incredibly impactful way that generative AI is going to affect learning is that we are going to be able to create much more accurate, real-time, formative assessments of our learners based on the work that they're doing. Some of the examples I've seen as, and this is all still kind of in the nebulous, we're walking out of the oozing evolutionary puddle of chat, OpenAI or generative AI, is that, for instance, everybody turns in their assignments, and then built into the LMS is a plugin that would be able to say, okay, here are some things that I'm noticing of all of your students based on writing style, or kind of helping you guide what should be the next thing that you should be leading them towards. Or even being able to do that with very concise competencies and things like that on maybe, more difficult science and math type assessments, where they can say, I'm noticing students are not understanding this particular thing, and being able to identify those at-risk students at a level that we've never been able to before. That's going to have a gigantic effect on being, making our instruction more effective to all of our students.
as we transition over here into the negatives, before we kind of get to, I just want to sort of preface this with what we've just covered in some of the ways that AI can be used in the classroom. They're great tips. I think there are some scenarios, certainly the examples I gave of the transcripts associated with a debate or grading the prompts, awesome ideas, but difficult to scale in certain scenarios, right? There's going to still need to be a human that does that grading. And so if you're teaching a course with, 25, 50 students, that's probably feasible. If you're teaching a large undergrad course that has 250, 500 students in it, that becomes a little less feasible. And I think in some of those scenarios where the grading of the content doesn't scale, there are sometimes, the need to block AI or to look at some of the downsides. So we do want to talk about that and then give you some options here as well if utilizing AI as part of your assessment is not possible or it's just not your desire. So with that, Jeff, I'll let you kick that off with the security and privacy risks.
Yeah. And this is one of those, quickly evolving pieces of generative AI, and just what are the security and privacy risks? And a lot of the biggest ones are we don't know yet, but we do know that they are storing and using and kind of vacuuming up this vast, amazing, incredible amounts of data. And when you acknowledge and say that you're, going to use these services, they all pretty much say, thank you for your data. We're going to use it as we use or as we need to. Now, most of that, is in such large data sets. It's anonymized. It's, what is that direct security and privacy risk? We don't know yet, but the key there is that we don't know. And so, I think the most important thing, and we're having to play catch up on this, is as universities, as corporations, as businesses, as classrooms, we need to have policies that are clear so our students, our learners, our employees know what is expected, so they're not unintentionally, giving, at-risk data to online databases, which is essentially anytime you put anything into ChatGPT, what you're doing. The other biggest part negative that I have found just, through interaction with others is that I believe that if we as the teachers, learners, trainers, educators, whatever your role is, do not take a leadership role in front of our students on this of using generative AI, it's going to have a very important effect on their kind of development of self and development of the academic curiosity and things like that. I have a kind of an anecdote that personal anecdote that I think pictures this or tells this really well. I have a really good friend who is a doctorate, amazing, has gotten several masters, really good learner. And her and I were talking about generative AI. And she was like, well, that all sounds good and great, but I'm sure it couldn't write doctorate level work. It has to be very specific. It has to be cited. It has to be, at a certain level that, it wouldn't pass muster. And I said, well, you might be surprised. Well, she took that as a challenge. And so she, in her doctorate program, chose a fairly innocuous, not very important assignment, but one that was going to be tedious. She was going to have to do a lot of reading for, do a lot of answering, a lot of writing for, and she, with my help of writing prompts and things, decided to use ChatGPT exclusively. Didn't do any of the pre-work, didn't do anything, with the sole intent of saying, watching, AI fall flat on its face. It was, to me, it was a little bit like the John Henry versus the steam engine type of tale. And the results were pretty devastating, but not in the way that I expected. So she turned the assignment in. The professor came back and with great enthusiasm shared with the class how great her work was, how it was the best work that she had ever seen her do. It should be an example for the class, yada, 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 and highlighted this work. The effect that that had on her psyche and ego and things like that has been really like palatable. Now she's an adult, she can handle it, but she has expressed to me like how demotivating that was, and how, now she feels like, why should I do any of this work if, AI can just generate it and do it so much better than what I've spent the last, I won't give away her age, but umpteen years getting good at, and now I can just type this in and anybody could do that. So when I think about that though, and transfer that to a fifth grader, imagine how that's going to affect a fifth grader's motivation to learn. So we're not going to be able to completely block those tools from them. We're going to have some tools that are going to help it and make it so that it's not as easy, but we really are going to need to lead them on how to use those tools and how to make them impactful in a positive way, rather than in that way that's going to maybe almost cripple their kind of intellectual curiosity.
And then on to probably one of the main reasons why a lot of people are here, the academic dishonesty topic, and what we do to try to uphold academic integrity in the new world of AI and ChatGPT. So, it's not fair to any student in a class if they know or suspect that their classmates are using AI chatbots, AI tools to kind of get a leg up. And so we want to look a bit at, why is AI so hard to detect accurately if you were talking about a post-exam approach? And what are some of our alternatives once we kind of understand the baseline as to why that is? So depending on how you want to define plagiarism, right? I think there is definitely an argument that could be made that says using ChatGPT still is plagiarism because you're presenting some idea that is not your own as your own. But if we think about plagiarism in the maybe traditional context of grabbing a chunk of text from somewhere, putting that into your writing and not citing it as someone else's idea, right? That does not occur, at least in most scenarios, with ChatGPT, because what ChatGPT is trained to do, it's trained to produce unique responses. It's trained to take thousands and millions of inputs from a ton of different sources and then compile those in a unique string of words that is not going to show up or be detected by a plagiarism detector. Because it has not plagiarized substantially from one individual source. It's taken a bunch of information and built that unique response. So, what that means is if you've got 10 different sources talking about the scientific method, each one's going to explain it differently. And then the AI model is going to take that aggregate of inputs and try to create a likely sequence of words in a unique way that's going to get that message across. So no individual source necessarily has been plagiarized. What this, another kind of little nugget tied into that explanation, it also means that because ChatGPT and chatbots are trained to produce unique content, that they will also do what's called, they will hallucinate, make up facts, right? Make up things in certain scenarios, because if it finds a string of words from one source and a string of words from another that are related to the same topic, it will combine those in unique ways, meaning you might not end up with the right facts. One example was I had asked ChatGPT about the founding of HonorLock, and it created this tale about how the company was founded and all of this and that. And there was about 25% of it that was true, and then 75% totally false. Names inserted in the wrong places, in terms people that hadn't joined the company until 5 years after it was founded was credited as being the founder of the company. All kinds of false information in that. Now with GPT-4, that's not yet publicly available to everyone, the expectation is that that's going to be 40% more likely to produce factual responses. So it's going to become a little bit tougher because it's going to be less likely to hallucinate. Identifying those hallucinations are a great way to say, oh, well, I don't even care if that was generated by AI because the answer is wrong. That's great, right? That's the best of it for everybody, but that's going to get tougher as GPT-4 and future iterations of other chatbot tools roll out. So the difference between AI and plagiarism detection, they're not the same thing. Plagiarism detection, like I explained before, that's going to be a tool that's going to use their database of resources, and that could be publicly available journals, articles, also all of the previous papers that have been submitted by students. That's going to make up the database of a plagiarism detection tool. They will run any paper that is submitted, check it against all of those resources in its database, and see if there is a percentage match. That's plagiarism detection. AI detection is looking at writing patterns to try to predict, was the text written by a human or was it written by AI? And I'm sure we've all read some of the stories around the inaccuracies of the AI detection portion of this conversation. And I'm going to explain a little bit more as to why it's so easy to game the system when it comes to AI detection tools. And it really comes down to the prompts, like I mentioned before. When a student uses a prompt, they could use, a basic prompt. We're going to call it semi-detailed or a detailed prompt. And based on how they write those up, you're going to see the drastic change in accuracy of AI detection tools. Oops, sorry about that. So first, if we give some examples, and I do want to preface this by saying that the percentages that we're going to show on the subsequent slides, this is an aggregate. We ran this through about 10 different AI detection tools, and we took the average score, and that's what we're going to display in these slides that are just upcoming. You can see here on this slide, I'm not going to go through in detail, but this just gives you a brief explanation as to what these different levels might mean, and you're going to see them on the other slides as well. So if we use a basic prompt example would be describe macroeconomics in one paragraph. You're going to see that these different tools that we tested found 85% likelihood that this was AI generated content. You use a basic prompt, the tools are pretty accurate in detecting that. Moving though to the next level of a semi-detailed prompt, and this is nothing too complex, right? Define macroeconomics using a conversational tone, but don't be informal. Use an analogy, use short, choppy sentences that have varying number of words. So you give it some details in how you want it to write that response. Now, the AI detection tools were on average at 30%. They were basically saying they were 30% confident that this thing was AI written. And then finally, using a detailed prompt, which you can read here, you give it specific words to leave out, kind of ask for sentences with varying numbers of words so that it doesn't look like it's AI generated. And now we're down to 2%, where no AI detection tool thought that this response was written by a chatbot. There's a whole handful of other ways around AI, right? Like an example, and the simplest one, if you feed back into ChatGPT and say, the response you just gave me was flagged as AI generated, please generate a new response. On all of the tests that was run, AI detection went from 99% to 0%, just with that simple prompt. Another one, is please write this in the tone of a college junior and include one typo. That one took it from 99% down to sub 30%. On 3 different detection tools tested. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out a way to prompt the system to then kind of throw AI detection tools off the scent. So that's the problem that we're faced with is, all right, if we can't detect it after the fact, but we do want to block it, right? We've decided that this assessment, it's not, we don't want to use AI tools like we were talking about in the first portion, but we don't trust or don't have faith in the accuracy of results post-exam. What are some other things that we can do to try to alleviate the problem? So we're going to start up with some kind of exam and instructional design tips. And then from there, we'll expand in some other options around potentially blocking AI.
So
number one, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I thought this was you. It's you.
Yeah, so number one, I mentioned the idea of the hallucination, right? So the reason that is that the chatbots do not, well, at least ChatGPT does not have access to search the internet, right? That's not what it's doing. It's not going and searching the web and finding a website and trying to build a response based off that. It's using its entire database of inputs to give you a response on the topic. So within your assessment building process, if you're able to cite specific resources, right? Let's say an academic journal. You cite this academic journal. Number one, there's a good chance that that academic journal was not used in the training model of ChatGPT. So that alone could give you a leg up and make it difficult for a student to use ChatGPT. And I see I mentioned in the comment that Baird and Bing can access the internet now. So take this tip with a grain of salt and maybe limit it to ChatGPT use cases. But if you can cite that specific resource, ChatGPT will have a tough time giving the student an accurate response. The second tip here, use time limits. I know that seems really simple, and it is, but there's a lot of evidence, and as a proctoring company, we analyze a lot of data around how long students are in tests for. And a lot of what our data shows us is the longer, there is a trend that students that are taking a long time are more likely to perhaps be involved in some type of academic dishonesty. Certainly not the case all the time, but cheating takes time. You have to go outside of the test. You have to do, in this case, a bunch of typing and prompting and copying and pasting and maybe modifying that response. So setting a time limit and trying to push students through the exam at maybe even a quicker pace than they would be comfortable, but then taking that into account in your final scoring, right? Maybe you grade on a curve, or maybe you know that students might leave 5 questions unanswered. That's a model that I've seen a lot of professors and instructors take, where, hey, let's just limit the amount of time a student has, because they're going to then have to try to base off their recollection and the things that they understand versus going out to outside sources. And then also, like we were mentioning before, leverage it if you feel like you want to. But we gave some of these tips before, so I'm not going to go into deep detail on them, but, use those debate topics, ask them to use the prompts, but then grade those prompts. Those are all options. The second thing here is extremely important, though. Set clear expectations of what you want the students to do. I think we read a lot of the horror stories around, oh, AI just passed this course, someone used ChatGPT to get their degree. And those are scary, and that we don't want dishonesty to kind of prevail. But I think it's important to remember that the vast majority of our students are not looking to do anything dishonest. They are going to follow the rules. And setting these clear expectations goes a long way for that vast majority of your course. Let's call it the 90%. Let that 90% know, and the other 10, but let the entire class student body know, look, I don't want you to use AI for these types of assessments, but for your quiz or your homework, maybe I don't mind it, right? Or whatever your personal opinion is on where and when it's appropriate and when it isn't. Be upfront, put it in your syllabus, set clear expectations. We see a lot of data on our end from the HonorLock side that shows, like, I'll give this example. We block extensions, which I'll talk about it in a little bit. And when we block an extension, we let the student know, hey, this extension is not allowed on your test. Then what we notice is over 2/3 of students come back the next time with that thing already turned off. Like they get in the habit. They understand what's expected. They know they're not allowed to use that thing on this exam. So they're not even going to try to game the system, work around it. They're just going to come prepared, ready to do their work. So I'd certainly encourage you, set the expectations, and the majority of your students will abide by those. And now getting into how we control it. Yeah, I'll kick it over to you, Jeff, first on the LMS front before we get into some other options on how we can block this.
There are a lot of settings or ways, just to leverage your tools. And it really just comes down to good learning design, and having an LMS that allows you to leverage, that learning design principles that are going to create great instruction that is not going to be able then to be completely kind of neutralized with generative AI. So, for instance, using lots of different things like forums and different ways of increasing interaction between the students, activities where they're having to pull things in from their personal life, because guess what generative AI doesn't know a lot about is personal anecdotes and things like that, and using those LMS tools and activities to have a lot more than just show a video and ask 5 questions, or read this assignment and write a reflection paper. That's the type of thing that doesn't get very in-depth on your LMS tools, but also is incredibly easy to just neutralize with generative AI, because they can just do that. It's when you start leveraging a lot more of the different types of activities that you're in that learning environment that you're going to have better outcomes, regardless of their availability of generative AI.
And then obviously, being an online proctoring company, we have a bunch of suggestions on how you can go about blocking AI tools. And going back to what I talked about on the post-exam detection front, this is definitely the approach that we've taken at HonorLock, and it is personally the way that I think is the best method. If you want to stop AI from being used, it needs to be blocked up front, not detected after the fact. So some things you can do, and a lot of these things are specific to HonorLock, but some may also apply if you're using another proctoring provider. So number one, use what we would call browser guard, or lock your browser. Our stats show that about 13% of test takers try to navigate outside of the exam. That's a pretty large portion. Browser guard or whatever version you may be using would stop them from doing so. So that's great. That's kind of nips 13% of attempts to get out of the test in the bud. You want to record the desktop of the student, right? What are they seeing on their monitor, so that you have evidence of where they went, what they did. That's a great deterrent. If students know that their screen's being recorded, that alone is enough to say, well, I'm not even going to risk going outside and trying to use ChatGPT on my computer. And if you think about, mobile devices and things of that nature, it's tougher to use ChatGPT on a phone if you're responding via an essay and now have to transcribe that thing into my test, right? So this whole game of kind of academic dishonesty that becomes more complicated if you're recording the desktop and using browser guard. You'd also want to look into a solution that blocks AI extensions. And so on the very first slide, when I was kind of showing the difference between things like ChatGPT and Bard and then transcript, ideally you want to block all of them, and that's what we're doing. So we see about 3% of students show up to a test with an extension that we need to block. Transcript, far and away, is the most common, 10 times more common than the second most popular extension. So you've got transcript at number 1, and then way behind in second, third, fourth, fifth are a whole slew of ChatGPT related extensions. You'll want to prevent copy and paste, so that if a student, is outside of the exam window, which maybe you're allowing for that test for an appropriate reason, you don't want them to be copying and pasting from chatbot back into their exam. And again, we see about 3% of students attempt to copy or paste during an exam process, and that gets blocked with browser guard being turned on. We do something called keyword detection at HonorLock. So we're not looking for just random sound or anything that's being said, because that's just going to throw a whole slew of noisy flags that no one cares about. But we're listening for specific keywords that can be indicative of academic dishonesty, or using AI tools, using Google, whatever those things are. That's how we've built our speech detection models. And that's what we're looking for to flag and then send to our proctors to intervene. And then on top of that, you also want to check the room, right? Have the students do like a workspace scan so that you can see there's no secondary devices in the area. And we have a whole slew of secondary device geared features, because that is by far the #1 way that any student is looking to game the system or get a leg up from an academic integrity standpoint. About 70% of all the violations that our proctors uncover have to do with cell phones. Far and away the #1 way that a student might be looking to cheat. So we have, multi-device detection, which is a unique feature to HonorLock that helps us detect if a student's searching online for content. We have a custom AI model that we've built that recognizes Apple handoff. So if there's another device logged in with the same Apple ID, we'll be able to identify that and try to remove it from the area. And then we also have some good preventative measures, one of those being search and destroy, where it puts a tool set in the instructor's hands. It's going to let you know which of your questions or what of your content has leaked online, so that you can then act on that and build a more unique assessment. And we have seen that between 2020 to 2023, there's been a 3x increase in the quantity of content leaked online. So in the past 3.5 years, just a massive growth in terms of questions that are now posted all over the internet. So search and destroy or a similar capability can let you know where those questions are and allow you to modify them and make your test more unique. I did see a couple of questions come through. There was one that was dropped in the chat a while back, and we can certainly take some Q&As now, but the one, it was related to security and privacy, or it wasn't even really a question so much as it was a comment. I did want to expand a little bit on the security and privacy topic. So there's one story that I read about maybe a month or so ago, where there was a company who I think had their source code essentially put into ChatGPT because their developers were using it to kind of fast track their coding, right? And then based on someone else's prompt, they actually got some snippets of that code responded back to them. So when we're talking about security and privacy, it's really about what you're putting into ChatGPT, Baird, whatever tool it is, just to clarify. So as an example, if you're an instructor and you're leveraging one of those tools to build out course content, you certainly would not want to put in private student information that may be protected by FERPA into ChatGPT, because now it has that and you don't know where it's going from there, right? And you certainly would never want that to be exposed to someone else that's asking for some prompt, and now all of a sudden your student's data is being used as part of that response. So I just wanted to expand on that just a little bit to maybe clarify. And then the other question I saw in the chat was related to accommodations and our time limit recommendation. So if you're really trying to crunch the time down on an exam to limit students' opportunity to cheat or to get access to other resources, that doesn't, you need to still account for students with accommodations, and you still could through your time and a half or double time or however you're setting up your accommodations. That I think still applies. Maybe you've just taken your exam from a standard of 60 minutes and you've reduced it to 30. So now your accommodated student is going to get 45 or whatever that ratio is for the students in your course. And then as a proctoring provider, we just piggyback off whatever the settings are in the LMS. So it's all irrelevant from a proctoring and security standpoint. We're going to respect whatever accommodation has been applied to that student on the Moodle side of things. All right, so we'll keep an eye here to see what other questions we have come in, because we've got a few minutes to be able to respond. So this question here, which I'll just go ahead and answer this one live. What's the best way to check whether our previous course materials have been leaked online? There's so many different sites. Well, I'll explain a little bit more in detail about how search and destroy works, because that's the best tool I know of to achieve it. And so the way this works is when you enable your test and you're using HonorLock will take all of the questions from that exam, and we're going to search the internet for those questions. So let's just say it has 20 questions. We'll search the internet, we'll find out where those 20 questions exist. We will then give you a report that's going to group those questions into 3 different buckets. We'll tell you which of the questions are unique. Hey, we couldn't find these anywhere on the internet. Great job. Totally unique content. We'll show you which questions are compromised. Those are the ones where we found them on like between 1 to 5 sites. So we found them on a small number of sites, but they are out there. For those compromised questions, you have the option, assuming it's content that you actually own and that you wrote, you can send a DMCA takedown notice to those sites. And we make that easy. You click one button and we send it on your behalf. There's no guarantee that they take it down, but we will send that DMCA takedown notice. And then the third batch would be prevalent questions. They're all over the internet. They're on 6, 7, 8, 20 sites. And for those, sending a takedown notice is a waste of everyone's time. So for those, we would recommend that you change the question because it's leaked, it's all over the web. So that's a little bit more about how search and destroy works. That's the best tool that I know of to help you find it quickly, where it's all you have to do is just click a button and we're going to give you that report and then you can take action. Right. I saw a question here in the chat around HonorLock and working with specific LMS platforms. And then one of our developers, Frank, responded, we have a series of APIs that any platform can integrate with. And we work with all the major LMSs today and are in the process of working right now with Moodle on getting things finalized and launched on that front.
And Yvonne had a question that I think was basically answered, but the previous course materials, and I think that search and destroy, just like you talked about, is probably the best tool that I know of to find and search the wide variety of places for that.
Yeah, so we have another one in the chat around creating quiz exam questions from a lecture. I think you were talking a bit about that, Jeff. I have some stories to expand on this as well, on what I've seen some professors do, but I'll defer to you first if you, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it could be as easy as putting whatever material that you want those questions. And then again, it comes down to good prompt writing, where you're asking specifically what you want. And asking maybe, give me a variety of questions, some that are, multiple choice, some that are whatever, fill in the blank, short answer. And then also tell it kind of the different levels of those questions that you want. And then it will write those. The other thing that I've seen that can be really useful, and this can capitalize on Moodle's ability to, for instance, create like categories and things like that, but within those quiz banks, but you can, because that will, in the realm of, academic integrity and things, the larger that quiz bank is with the more different types of questions but that are well written and relevant, can make a huge impact on the validity of that quiz. But the reason it's not done is because it's a lot of work to write that many different questions. So you can utilize the technology to say, okay, now write 7 questions that require analysis on this and with this category, and put them in there. Another just quick tip on something like that, if you're doing lots of those types of questions and needing those filled out, tell the ChatGPT what format you want those in. So for instance, if you have it right, it can write it in like a table format or something like that. That makes it much easier for you then to copy and paste into Moodle, into an Excel spreadsheet that can be uploaded into Moodle, something like that.
And then one more thing on that topic of generating questions and kind of tying it back to search and destroy, a great way of creating a variety of versions of a question is using ChatGPT or generative AI. So you can feed it in your original question. Let's say that search and destroy has found that this question is prevalent all over the internet. You could feed that question into ChatGPT and ask, say, hey, can you please create 5 variations of this question for me? And now all of a sudden the question will be reworded. Sometimes, the answers, the distractors, those things will be reworded and changed. And now you've got a batch of questions that you can perhaps replace that leaked content with. Or if you want to do a variety of question variations for different sections of your course or something like that, you have the option to do that, and you can leverage ChatGPT to at least assist in that, right? Definitely check the response and make sure that you are happy with it, what it spits out, but it's a tool that can be used in that scenario as well. All right, do we have any other final questions before we wrap things up? Let me just check.
Real quick, I'll answer Bren's question on just, do you do any scripting using AI to generate courses? It's interesting. We just had a very, very high level kind of brainstorming on what next generation of Moodle will look like. And that's exactly one of the places where we looked at AI will affect LMSs. So for instance, rather than having to go through and site admin menus and things like that to change things or create things, just as you said, you'll simply type in and talk to your Moodle bot, and Moodle bot can say, hey, I want a course that has 7 sections. I want the names of these sections to be this. I want a form in each one. You'll go through and just kind of narratively tell it. It may ask some questions to fine tune what it wants from you. And then exactly like you just said, it will create that out of the blue. Sandy had a question about, and it was a follow-up, and I had asked a question when she had asked about, well, what would you suggest for logins to ChatGPT for learners? The easiest and I think the most effective is, and most schools have some type of single sign-on, use that. I think that's a great way to make that easy for them. Otherwise, I don't know that there's any more security concerns with the login of, ChatGPT or any of those as I would have with a textbook publisher that they have to make a login for, or, any of the various dozens of millions of sites that our students are having to make logins for. It's more on the security and privacy is more on what that information that we're putting in there to create stuff. But PII is constantly a difficult thing when we're working with young learners to handle.
Any final questions here in the last minute?
That is even more true, Sandy, especially for the military.
All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions coming through, and we are just about at time. So we definitely thank you so much for joining. Awesome audience, great questions. Hopefully Jeff and I have provided you with some useful info that you could take back and think on and maybe implement some into your institution, courses, wherever you might be. So thanks again. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you. I put my email in. If anybody needs any follow-up questions, they're happy to email me.
Awesome. All right, thanks everyone.